Hello guys, we have again come back with another ethics keyword series, and in this particular series or in this particular video we'll be discussing about social influence. You know how social influence is important. UPSC has indirectly asked questions. We'll not only see the definitions, quotations, examples, but also we'll see how UPSC can frame questions and how to approach this particular topic if question is asked. Okay, without much ado, let's start. So we have done our attitude. So there is a conceptual link of your social influence with your attitude. Now, attitudes are defined as a general evaluation that individuals holds regarding themselves, other people, objects and issues. We have studied this, we have understood this in last class, right? Now, in this particular case, there are two things that you have to understand. Persuasion and social influence are fundamentally characterized as a process of what? Process of intentionally or unintentionally altering this attitude, belief and subsequent behaviors, right? If attitude is a mental cognition or is a mental process, right? Your persuasion and social influence are an instrument to do what? Is an instrument to intentionally or unintentionally alter these attitudes, the belief system that is within you, and subsequently your behavior, right? So we will understand, we'll take up this particular term today, social influence, and we'll have a 360 deep dive into it. Okay, now let's start with the definition. Social influence is the process by which individuals adapt their opinion, revise their beliefs or change their behavior as a result of social interactions with other people. The term social influence is there in your syllabus, and hence it is very important to understand that it is a process by which individual comes to play, right? Where an individual adapt their opinion, they might have an opinion, they adapt to a particular opinion, right? Revise their beliefs, right? Revise their beliefs, they might have a particular belief, they revise it, right? And change their behavior as a result of social interactions with other people. So this is your what? Social influence. It is because of the social interaction with other people. What is changing? Your behavior is changing, your belief system is changing, right? Your opinions are changing, right? So best example, you can give this particular as a diagram or this particular diagram as a schematics or a flow chart. Now guys, let's understand 5 types of such social persuasion. The most important here will be conformity. Now what is conformity? It involves changing behavior. Now understand this, it involves changing behavior to match group norms due to a desire to fit in or need to be correct, right? I need to conform to that particular group within which I have situated myself in, right? I have to conform to that. One of the best examples and one of the most horrific example would be the 1930s and the early 1940s of your Germany, right? Where even people who were not particularly bent on Nazism, they did not participate in the Nazi party, were favorable towards Nazi party because of what? Because they wanted to conform to what? The prominent and the so-called the propaganda that was going around, right? So ordinary citizens conform to what? Conform to dominant anti-Jewish norms despite personal doubts. They had their doubts, but they had to conform because other people. But there were certain exceptions also, people who did not conform to this. And guys, in the sessions in this lecture series, we have talked about a person. Please go and revisit. We have talked about a person of courage, of conviction, who did not conform to this, right? So in this particular case, in case of conformity, the best example would be people who did not have particularly aligned to Nazi Germany or Nazi ideology had to conform because it was hugely in favor during that time, right? Let's see the second one. The second is your compliance. Now, what is compliance? Compliance is agreeing to a request. It is agreeing to a request. But there is no authority, there is no authoritative compulsion. The best example here would be your public participation in Swachh Bharat mission through persuasion campaigns. Like we have seen many personalities, many movie stars, many politicians who have taken out broom and have come out in the road. That persuaded you, right? That persuaded you to engage in this social movement. So this is compliance. So there is no authority which is pressurizing you to take that particular decision or or change your behavior, right? Compliance is very willfully done, very voluntarily done, right? Now, this is very important, obedience. Now, when compliance is very willfully done, very voluntarily done. In case of obedience, what happens? Obedience is that it is an authority driven behavior. It is authority driven behavior, like it has been pushed from above. One of the worst examples was during the Vietnam War, and this particular, like, remember this and try to quote this My Lai massacre, right, where it is what happened was there was an atrocities committed by the American soldiers based on the direction that was given to them by their commanders, right? They did not oppose it. The authorities said go and kill. Innocent children were killed, women were killed, right? So this particular kind of obedience was seen, obedience towards the authority was seen in Vietnam War, and particular incident was My Lai massacre. So you can quote this, My Lai massacre. Okay, now let's come to the fourth part. Fourth part is your identification. Influence to maintain relationship or group identity. People change because they want to belong. Look, in case of conformity, people did not change. They just went on with the public. They conformed. But here, people will change. People will bring physical changes. People will bring ideological changes, right? So this is your identification, right? And best example will be your, the Korean K-pop band BTS. Like people dress like them. People, follow them, right? So that is one of the good examples of identification. You identify. They dress like them. They try to look like them, right? So this is a kind of a persuasion, that social persuasion that is happening, social influence that is happening, right, on a global scale, on a global map, right? And last but not least, now this is very important, is your internalization. Now this is very important. Internalization means deep acceptance based on personal values. Now this is the most stable form. Belief becomes part of your value system. Right. So if you believe something, but it becomes part of the value system, because the moment it becomes a part of the value system, you take decision based on it. You take action based on it. Right. So internalization is that you internalize that particular belief so deeply that it becomes part of your value system. The best example would be what? The best example would be your Acharya Vinoba Bhave, right? Adoption of non-violence inspired by Mahatma Gandhi as a personal ethical principle. He deeply imbibed this value within him, and then he did not just imbibe this particular value within him, he followed it through and through, right? It was probably in his belief system that led to him imbibing this particular value of non-violence, right? Truthfulness, right? And once he have imbibed, he has internalized it, he lived it, right? He lived it. That is the most important thing. Okay, guys, now we will understand the techniques of influence. The first is your persuasion, right? So persuasion, we will understand persuasion deeply tomorrow, right? It is a separate topic. We will understand it tomorrow well, but it is a form of influence, social influence, right? Where it's changing attitudes through communication based on source credibility, message quality, and the audience involvement. The best example in this particular case will be during COVID-19 vaccination drives, the government of India used highly credible photos of Prime Minister, right, in this particular scheme called Har Ghar Dastak, to socially influence people to come and take COVID vaccines, which people were reluctant to, right? Let's see the second technique. What is the second technique? The second technique is nudge. Remember Richard Thaler got Nobel Prize because of this nudge technique, right? If you remember. So what is this particular nudge? Like subtle nudge in choice architecture that steer behavior without coercion, right? So what do we mean by that? So in this particular case, under Swachh Bharat mission, toilets were framed as symbols of dignity called Izzat Ghar, right? It was called Izzat Ghar. Like it is nudging that in order to maintain women's dignity, we should be using, toilet, right? So this is again, you can mention about nudge, where it is, it's a choice of architecture. The way it is being designed, so that the way the particular scheme is designed, that you nudge person towards opting for something which is good, right? It's not coercion. Then another technique is very important, foot in the door. So it starts with small requests and then increase likelihood of agreeing to a larger one. If you remember, with regards to filing of taxes, initially it started with what? Initially it started with, simply linking your PAN with the Aadhaar. right? It started with simply linking the PAN with the Aadhaar. So it's a low effort compliance, right? You link your income with the, when you are getting your okay, cut. Okay, now let's see the another technique of influence, foot in the door. This is foot in the door technique. It starts with a small request. Like the salesman says that I have a small request. You listen to me. It starts with a small request, and then the bigger request comes in, right? And then increases likelihood of agreeing to a larger one, right? So best example will be tax compliance by the Income Tax Department of India, where initially it started with what? Simply it linked your PAN with the Aadhaar, right? Just link your PAN with the Aadhaar. That was a simple request that was made by income tax. And then after that, what happened? After that, gradually pushed towards full digital filing and disclosure norms, right? So higher compliance, now higher. So this particular initially starts small and then you go for the big. So this is called the foot in the door. Just put your foot in the door once the door is left ajar, and then you let yourself in, right? So this is another form of technique of what? Of your social persuasion. The fourth technique is your door in the face. It's just the opposite, right? The opposite of foot inside the door, right? Foot in the door. It's just the opposite, door in the face. It starts with a large request, which is likely to be denied, right? It starts with a large request likely to be denied, and then instead of that, what they do is that it follows with a smaller acceptable one. The best example would be that under GRAP, authorities first proposed that entire ban of construction totally, right? But again, it faced opposition. Because it faced opposition, then what happened? Then it was reduced to only limited amount of time, that between these many hours you cannot do your construction, right? So initially you start big. When it's not accepted, then you provide a smaller alternative, right? So this is another form of your social influence. Like last but not least is your low ball, and this we see, right? For example, the best example in this case is that under Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, right? First, it starts with giving you free LPG. The moment they have given you free LPG, right? You have been habituated of using free LPG, right? Then what happens? Then the connect, then continue, you have to pay to refill that LPG, right? You have gotten the cylinder for free, right? But obviously, it is not eternal. You have to fill it, and then there is cost. So it starts like it's lowballing. It's very less amount, and many corporate also does that. Like you start with 20 rupees, 30 rupees, and then once you get habituated, they will increase the price, right? As we are seeing more often in our mobile phone recharges, right? So secure agreement at a low price, right? Secure agreement at a low price or low perceived cost, and then later increase the commitment, right? Okay, now we will see some of the notable quotations. So John F. Kennedy, right? John F. Kennedy says what? It says conformity is the jailer of freedom and the enemy of growth. You can use this particular quote in your answer. Conformity is what? Is the jailer of freedom. Remember conformity, right? We have studied conformity, right? In types. The first conformity where the Nazi people or the Nazi the people of Germany accepted the Nazi doctrine. They did not even though they did not like that particular ideology, right? They accepted it, right? They conformed to that particular ideology, right? So conformity is a jailer of freedom and enemy of growth. So again, we have seen what has happened to Nazi Germany, right? Then come Robert Cialdini, very important, and we'll understand Robert Cialdini when you will be doing persuasion, right? He has given a very important, six very important principles on persuasion, right? So people do not just follow logic, they follow people. And as we do, right? We do it in the age of Twitter, in age of Instagram, the followings that we have, right? We don't follow logic. We follow people who probably gives some sound logic, and at times not so sound logic, right? Then your Richard Thaler, as we discussed, Richard Thaler is a Nobel laureate who got Nobel Prize in what? He got Nobel Prize in nudge theory, right? And what he says, a nudge is any aspect of choice architecture that alters behavior in a predictable way without forbidding options. Again, another important quote is, example is not the main thing in influencing others, it is the only thing. And who says? Albert Schweitzer. He says that example is the only thing, because the moment you closely associate with an example than an argument, right? And that's the reason why in your ethics paper, it is not only argument that you have to give example, because argument shows your cognitive orientation to frame frame a logical argument, right? right? But example shows that how you can associate that logical argument with the real life thing that is happening, right? That gives that makes your paper more humane, right? And hence, according to Albert Schweitzer, right, example is not the main thing that in influencing others, it is the only thing. Like if you want to influence your examiner and get good marks, right, example is one of the most important thing, right? But yes, of course, you have to give content also and you have to give argument also. Now let's see some of the questions. First question, social influence shapes attitudes, behavior and ethical decision making in society and administration. So this is the context. Discuss the major types and techniques of social influence with suitable contemporary examples, and we have discussed like types and techniques. Like conformity is one type, right? Techniques we have seen, door in the jar, door on the face, like these are the technique. Persuasion is another kind of technique, right? We have seen those techniques, right? So we can answer this particular question from the content that we have studied. So guys, this is your social persuasion, social influence rather, and tomorrow we will take up another new topic, that is your persuasion. Thank you.